60 Minutes Rewind.
In any high-profile federal investigation of a terrorist act like the September 11th attack on America, there are bound to be successes and failures, promising leads that pan out, but also innocent people swept up in the dragnet. One American who knows all about that is Richard Jewell, who was falsely accused of a terrorist act back in 1996, the setting off of a bomb at the Atlanta Olympics. In a very public investigation by the FBI and the Atlanta police, Jewell was branded the chief suspect in the bombing. We got to know Richard Jewell back in 1996, but it wasn't until recently that we realized how deeply affected he was by his ordeal and why it's been so difficult for him to recover from what happened 5 years ago. It all began when the bomb exploded in Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park just after 1 a.m. on July 27, 1996. Richard Jewell was working as a private security guard there, and he helped escort many of the spectators to safety. He was called a hero. And then everything changed. You may not want to go back and relive it, but how did it happen? You were a hero, and then you were a villain.
And it happened like that.
And what started the fiasco?
The headline of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that afternoon,
Which
pretty
said?
much started the whirlwind.
FBI suspects hero guard may have planted bomb.
Linwood is Richard Jewell's lawyer.
Hero in quotation marks, sarcastic. Banner headline that was read to the world verbatim as breaking news on CNN.
And then, of course, AP picks it up, and it just mushrooms.
The story leaked to the media was that Jewell wasn't a hero at all, but was himself the bomber who perversely sought publicity for saving people from the explosion.
Richard Jewell fits the profile of the lone bomber. Absolutely false.
Not true.
But everybody then assumed that this bizarre character, as he was being portrayed, had decided that this was going to be his 15 minutes of fame, that he was going to set up this situation where he would literally bomb a park and then claim to be a hero.
The FBI put Jewell under round-the-clock surveillance and conducted a very public search of his apartment, all of it broadcast on live television. It was not until many weeks later that the FBI finally acknowledged Jewell was not a suspect in the bombing. Did Louis Freeh or anyone from the FBI ever call you up and say, Mr. Jewell, we made a mistake, we're sorry?
No, sir. Nobody's ever called me, written me a letter, sent me an email, called any of my attorneys.
In 5 years?
No, sir.
Richard Jewell, in fact, saved over 100 innocent people's lives that night, and no one has ever bothered to even say, thank you, Mr. Jewell. Not the city of Atlanta, not the state of Georgia, not the Olympic Committee in Atlanta, not the International Committee.
How do you account for that?
Because he's so tainted that even when he was exonerated, no one still wanted to really be identified with him.
I don't understand it.
It's the taint that will live with this man forever, because he will forever still be identified as a man that the public believed bombed the park.
Linwood, you told me last night that you thought he was guilty.
I did. I actually believed what I saw on television and what I read in the newspapers, and I thought that the FBI had their man, and their man was Richard Jewell.
I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Wallace. There's 6, 7 people in this room with us right now.
Yeah.
And I don't care what they say now. That first week, everybody in this room thought I was the bomber.
That's true. Including me.
Yes, sir.
When I first met him a few weeks after the bombing, Jewell was still a suspect, and he is right, I did think he might indeed be the bomber. But I changed my mind after he described to me back then what had happened that night in July when he noticed a suspicious-looking package under a park bench and pointed it out to a federal ATF agent.
He was laying flat on his stomach, and he was undoing the top of the bag with his hand, and he was doing his flashlight like this, and all of a sudden he just froze. What really made me think this is bad, is there was like a little line in training that they taught you that would instill in you, and it was, if you see an ATF agent running, you better be in front of him.
So did you start to run too?
No, sir.
You stayed there within 10 yards of where the package was?
Yes, sir. We were just concerned with getting the people as far away as we could, as quickly as we could.
Can you stop for a second, please? Did you turn around? Where were you at 1 o'clock on that morning? What kind of questions were they asking?
That summer, Jewell was besieged by the media wherever he went. And the FBI kept following him, too. When he went out for a drive, they were always there. Not just that one agent in the blue Jeep, but a whole FBI convoy which chased him on and off the interstate. A total of 5 or 6 FBI vehicles. The FBI also searched the home of Jewell's mother, Bobby.
What'd they take out of your apartment?
They took Richard's guns, which he has always hunted. He deer hunts. Then they took all of my Tupperware. I mean, every piece of Tupperware. They took 22 of my Walt Disney tapes.
And the TV cameras were always there.
I felt like it was a movie production. Every light, there must have been 20 satellite trucks in our parking lot. I'm living a nightmare.
I don't know if you ever saw this.
No, sir, I didn't see it.
As the weeks went by, the torment by the media turned to ridicule. Jay Leno called you Una Doofus. A federal agent was quoted as saying you were Una Bubba. Your mother was called the Una Mama.
Yes, sir.
In late October of '96, the U.S. attorney finally wrote this letter saying Jewell was not considered a target of the federal criminal investigation. A statement delivered to one of Jewell's lawyers at this out-of-the-way coffee shop far away from the TV cameras. And unlike the public FBI investigation of Jewell, there was no FBI press conference. Jewell and his attorney Lynn Wood say the FBI was simply too embarrassed.
We now know a lot more than we knew at the time when we sat down and talked with you initially. We know, for example, that the FBI was interested in Richard, but had really not decided whether Richard Jewell was a possible suspect or a potentially valuable witness. But before they could execute their plan, the banner headline gets published, and now all of a sudden, the FBI's got to come to grips with Richard Jewell in a public investigation. And that changed, I think, the whole approach that the FBI took.
Jewell was originally planning to sue the FBI, but eventually decided it would be futile to sue the federal government. He did sue a number of media organizations, and several settled. NBC, CNN, the New York Post, and an ABC radio station, for a total believed to be in excess of $2 million. The Atlanta Journal and Constitution, though, has refused to settle with Jewell, and 5 years after the bombing, the paper is still fighting the case in court. Attorney Peter Canfield is defending the newspaper.
The plaintiff has consistently claimed that he should never have been a suspect of the FBI in the bombing. But he's never sued the FBI. Instead, he's asserted that the Journal-Constitution is to blame for all of his troubles by being the first to accurately report that he had, in fact, become the investigation's focus.
What he's saying is that the paper was accurately reporting what it had been told, that Richard Jewell was a suspect.
Look, call him a suspect. Put it in your newspaper. You will not be sued for calling Richard Jewell a suspect. You will be sued when you publish in your newspaper that he's a villain, a bad man, he fit the profile of the lone bomber of the park, he sought publicity, and he's like Wayne Williams, a convicted murderer of children. Put that in your newspaper, and you will be sued. That's what the Atlanta Journal and Constitution said about this man.
The story will continue after this.
717, 704.
For the past 5 years, Richard Jewell has been trying to put his life back together. He did manage to find a job as a police officer in a small community. He lost 65 pounds, got married last September, a private affair, no TV cameras, no chance. And Jewell is still just as angered at what the media did to him as he was back in 1996. I want to show you what you said then and get your reaction to it.
Okay.
Let's take a look.
People will never forget my name. people will be 90 years old that were at the Olympic Games and go, do you remember when that bomb went off, that Jewell fella that they accused of that? Do you remember that? And people will be going, yeah, I remember that. Can you believe all that? It will never end, sir.
And it has not ended, you say?
No, sir, it hasn't. And it won't. I mean, I know that, you know.
You'd be surprised to know how many people come up to me and will still nudge me and say, hey, so tell me, did he really do it? That question is still asked.
You go to a grocery store and you hear people whisper your name. They stare at you. They point at you. Driving home from work, you're always looking in your rearview mirror. If you see a car there, the same car for a long time, you turn off even though it's not your turn to see if that car follows you. You drive a different way home every night.
5 years later?
Yeah.
Despite?
When you come out to get in your car in the morning, you walk around it and look under it. You look around the parking lot to see if somebody's sitting in a car.
Richard, wait a minute. It turns out that you were a hero, not the bomber.
Sir, I've never been treated like a hero. Never. I don't know what a hero's treated like, but my mother and I have never been treated like that.
Well, wait a second. You were, in fact, a hero.
Well, thank you.
You realized what was going down.
Well, I did my job that night.
That's correct.
And
undoubtedly saved a lot of lives in doing it.
well, thank you, sir. Not many people say that. Most people say you're the ex-suspect.
Still.
Yes, sir. Still.